The agenda today is we're going to start with an introduction by Michael Ewing, and then we're going into a keynote, short 10-minute keynote from Senator Alice Mary Higgins, looking at the Sustainable Development Goals from the local to the global. We have two case studies, a Greek case study from Pavlos Giardis from Alexandropolis, and a local case study from Jeanette O'Brien from Carlow County Council. We will then open up for some questions, just 10 minutes to do questions. So any questions in the chat would be great. And then we go into breakout rooms looking at what we can do in our local authorities to ensure the Sustainable Development Goals form the foundation for our recovery plans. So we're in our breakout rooms for 25 minutes. We're able to have some free-flowing discussion. There'll be a short reporting of some key insights, one or two from each room. And then we have a keynote reflection from Sarah Franklin, who was the former coordinator of Coalition 2030. So that's our agenda. So please introduce yourself in the chat. Any questions, insights, or reflections that we go through in the chat, and I'll hand over to Michael Ewing for the introduction. Michael.
Hi, hopefully you can hear me. Okay, so can you see the screen? Can you see my share screen all right? Good, excellent. Okay, as already introduced, my name is Michael Ewing. I'm going to spin you very quickly through the history of the SDGs, where they came from, what they mean, and the problems that they're attempting to solve. So just hold on very tight because it's going to be very speedy, okay? Oh, there we go. Okay, so this is the way in which the Irish Environmental Network sees the world. It's not the way it's presented in the media, generally speaking, where the economy is king. It's the economy stupid, the economy stupid, the economy stupid. But actually, it isn't the economy stupid. It's the environment stupid, because actually, without our natural environment, we are banjaxed. As a species, one of 2 billion species on this planet, we cannot survive without a healthy environment. So we don't look after the environment. Our societies, which emerged from that environment, as human beings, as a species, we developed our societies, and our economy was developed to serve our society. So what is the problem? What are the things that are causing us issues right now? There's masses of them, of course, but I want to focus in on a couple of them. This is one of them. There's just rather a lot of us. Our population is growing rapidly. It's probably going to tail off and decrease slightly towards the end of the century, but right now it's growing very rapidly. The only time it went down was during the Black Death, which was not something we want to look forward to happen again. So it's an issue. There's too many of us in one sense. There's just too many of us taking up too much space and taking up too many of the natural resources, and that's causing problems, as we'll see, in other areas. So this is one of them. Species on the verge of mass extinction. We can see, looking at the records, the fossil records, that extinction rates were generally very, very, very slow. And then gradually they speeded up over the present time to be very much faster, 1,000 times faster. And in the future, it's modeled that they're going to be 10 times the current rate. That means they're going to be 10,000 times faster than the natural rate of extinction. This is something that finger points mostly at the human beings for creating this change. And then we have this one, which is obviously climate change, which we're all familiar with at this stage, but a lot of people don't seem to think it's that serious. But it is obviously extremely serious, because it's actually interlinked with the other two things. The increasing carbon dioxide is closely related to human population, or at least the way in which human beings are behaving rather than the population. And it's closely linked to the impacts on biodiversity as well. And then there's this final one, which is COVID-19, which we're all very familiar with right now, which the world is reacting to in a way which it hasn't done to anything else in a long, long time, if ever. So we can see the possibilities of making rapid change. And so what's the plan to deal with all these issues? Well, the plan is this. It's a document called Transforming Our World, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. It's a universal call to action to end poverty, protect the planet, and ensure that all people enjoy peace and prosperity. This was agreed by 193 nations back in 2015. The Irish and Kenyan ambassadors drove the process, and we should be very proud of the work David Donoghue, our UN ambassador, did in this. It's a pity that the follow-on from that isn't as good as the lead up to it, but in terms of Ireland. The key issues here, the key cross-cutting objectives are intergenerational equity. That means looking after the people that are going to come after us. We inherited a very pleasant and prosperous world, but we're gradually turning it into something quite different. The second one is to leave no one behind. That means individual people and nations. There are many nations that are struggling to survive right now. There are many people within our own society who are struggling to survive. The SDGs look after them all. Ireland has a national implementation plan, which you can find on the website of the Department of Communication, Climate Action and the Environment. It is for 2 years, it runs out this year, and to be honest with you, it hasn't really made a large impact. So these are the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. If you look at them, it's kind of rather a lot of different things all lined up together, and it doesn't seem like they all join together, but actually it's just one big whole. They're labeled under different headings to enable follow through on them. So you can see that each of those has targets attached to them, and each target has indicators to show how countries are succeeding in delivering on them. But if we think about, if we look at the goals, we can see, for example, that the environmental targets cover, of the 17 goals, 15 of them have environmental targets. So clearly, there's an interlinking between the different goals in relation to the targets. So we go back to the original image that I showed you and think about the SDGs in this context. How did the SDGs fit into this model, this realistic model of the world, as opposed to the one we're presented in the media? How did the SDGs fit into this? Well, thankfully, the Stockholm Resilience Centre has produced a model which shows how these goals can be linked into that idea. So the biosphere is fundamental. It's the life on land, life underwater, clean water and sanitation, and the climate. These are the things that make it possible for us to live on this planet and for other species to live too, and for us to share the planet. And then you have society, where you have things like no poverty, which is obviously extremely important, end of hunger, etc., etc. And then you have the economy, and tying it all together, you have partnerships for the goals, people working together to make sure the goals are delivered on. Okay, so what's essential for the success of the goals? Partnership is number one. Partnership, partnership, partnership. And it's civil society, partnership together within civil society. And we have a civil society coalition in Ireland called Coalition 2030. The government at national, local, and regional levels, the general public, and obviously leaving no one behind. All these things are key for the success of the SDGs globally and in Ireland. So thank you very much. That's my presentation. I hope I gave you some idea very quickly of what's going on here. I'll hand you back to Davey.
Thanks, Michael. And once again, if you have any comments or insights you'd like to share, we can put that in chat and we can bring that into the report, as well as seeing it here and informing our discussions. So we have a short keynote presentation now from Senator Alice Mary Higgins on the Sustainable Development Goals from local to global. Before coming in, independent Senator Alice Mary worked as the coordinator for COLA of Anti-Racism Project, and has also worked as at the National Women's Council for Ireland, the Older and Bolder, Ireland Action Aid for Ireland, and Trócaire, where she campaigned on climate change, food security, and peace building. Senator Higgins has been advocating widely for adoption of the Sustainable Development Goals and is an active member of the International Parliamentarian Assembly for the implementation of the goals. So Alice Mary, you have 10 minutes, and thanks for being here.
Thank you very much. And it's really good to see this happening, and it's brilliant to see so many councillors from all different parts of Ireland being excited about what the goals can mean for them. Because in the end, for the Sustainable Development Goals to be meaningful, they have to happen in real places. They have to change how things happen in real places. And something that I've always said when people talk to me about policy, and they think that policy and politics are a thing that are far away and removed, is that policy in the end is just a set of decisions we make about how we live together in real places. Be those places the community, be they cities, be they our country, Europe or the world. It is in the end a set of ideas about what does living together in a good way mean. And the Sustainable Development Goals are one of the moments of great global vision in terms of how we could and should live together in a way that's sustainable, in a way that's more equal, in a way that works for everybody. And you know, while they might seem abstract in a sense, because when you dive down into these goals, the 17 of them, they really relate to the lived experience of life. But they also allow a conversation about about what it is to live together that is global. So it's a conversation that can be had at any level, involving these same key reference points, the same key indicators. And it is worth acknowledging what an incredible thing it was. Everybody knows how difficult it is to get even 10 people in a room to agree on something. But to have 193 countries agree on a vision for what development should look like, what it is to live sustainably with each other. And it came at a moment in the same year as the Paris climate talks, where we had the Paris Climate Agreement, when there were some really key moments of vision for how do we connect together, a recognition of interdependence. And then in the years following that, we've had some fragmentation in terms of multilateralism. We've seen some countries trying to pull away from that kind of multilateral doing things together. And then along comes COVID. And it's another reminder, very much what climate activists have been telling us for years, is that we are interdependent. We live on an actual real planet, a real place. And the people around us matter. We depend on them. And I think it's been a real reminder to people of that point of interdependence, and indeed the need for intergenerational solidarity, as was spoken about. So for what they mean and what's different about the Sustainable Development Goals is that they are universal. They apply everywhere. I've talked about that. The other thing that's really important is these are not a kind of inspirational or aspirational list. I often say about how, even though they're very colorful and they're very beautiful, and I've like a pile of jewelry based on them now, they basically are not simply there as a Pinterest board for us to pick something that's colorful and nice and use it in our branding. They are an actual framework. They have real targets. And for some people who kind of see the goal, and it seems, I would encourage everybody to dive into the targets. And you may find targets that don't seem relevant to you because they are targets that maybe Ireland has already achieved but needs to hang on to. But there's other ones. I was even just glancing, road traffic deaths, you know, the diversity of local plant life, the role of culture in tourism. All of those targets that are buried underneath these goals are ones that can have a real meaning in a variety of different places. So just to give examples of what we've done in a national level, for me, on a national level, working with I lead the civil engagement group. It's a group of senators who all come from civil society background. When we put forward our community participation bill, which was around disability access to buses, it was around disability friendly playgrounds, we were talking about Sustainable Development Goal number 11, which was around inclusive participation. The idea of sustainable cities and communities where everyone could participate. When we debated menstrual health and access to menstrual health, we were talking about goal number 5 on women's rights and goal number 6 on sanitation. When I debate the finance bill and I question some of the choices on taxation, I'm reminding them that the Sustainable Development Goals say that tax changes should actually benefit those on lower incomes. So that's how real it can be in the course of an actual debate in terms of when you're actually translating it. And it's really important in terms of challenging policy and looking at policy. And I've been pushing to kind of hold national government to really think about how these things work. But as well as being a tool like that around issues you want to raise and champion, it's also allows a conversation that is international. And that international conversation is something that can start from anywhere. So for me, being in the parliamentarians for the goals, it means that if I'm talking to parliamentarians from Ghana, from Uganda, from Costa Rica, from Denmark, and we talk about life underwater, or we talk about that idea of sustainable cities, or we talk about, you know, gender equality, we're using a common language. We know what each other is talking about. We're able to help each other and use and exchange ideas. and we're able to hold each other to account. And this is something I've often used, the analogy of the human rights, that moment after the horrors of World War II, when the whole world agreed on the Human Rights Charter. And the Human Rights Charter being agreed as that vision for how it is acceptable to treat each other. What are the basic dignities and rights that every person should have? It didn't all get fixed immediately. It didn't all come into being just because we signed the Human Rights Charter. But what it did is it set a common standard, and it allowed countries to hold themselves to each other to account. And even when countries were disregarding human rights, it gave a power to each individual citizen in the world to say, there are rights that are widely recognized that belong to me in terms of what is acceptable. And similarly, this is a vision that belongs to everyone. The key responsibility is on national governments, but the impetus, the drive, the mandate can be pushed from everybody. And there are places in the world where cities, councils, community areas are leading the SDGs even when national governments aren't. We've seen that in Brazil, for example. We have Brazilian cities that are pushing ahead on the SDGs even when Bolsonaro, for example, isn't a fan. And we've seen that on climate too, where in many places there are communities that are leading on climate, and they are ahead of the curve. I know I'm coming into my last minute, so they are ahead of the curve in terms of what it is. And what I would encourage all of you is, when you're thinking about how you use these goals, look to partnerships, as Michael said, look to partners that are in unexpected places. It's a chance for you to work with universities, with civil society, with technical institutes. And it's also for a chance for you to draw relationships with other councillors, national parliamentarians and international parliamentarians. And you may find ideas that are working somewhere else, and you can take those ideas and champion them here in Ireland. But also, some of you will come up with insightful, brilliant ideas about how to make the SDGs a reality. And I know, and you can take those ideas, you have a chance to multiply their impact. So if you do something brilliant as a pilot in Carlow, in Galway, in Tipperary, you can actually take that idea and share it with other councils around the world. So it's a real chance for that exchange of ideas. And I know that each of you, that my final comment, has lots of different passions. People come into politics because they care about children's rights, or they care about local business, or they care about, the environment. There's lots of individual passions. I would say you don't have to take it on. Somebody said in our last session that it seemed like a lot. You don't have to take it all on. The point is that there's lots of ways in. Whatever expertise or insight you have on a particular topic, you can lay it alongside the others who are working in the other sustainable development goals. And it means, rather than a competition between which of these 5 or 6 issues is more important, you have a collaboration where each issue is part of a collective vision forward. And it allows you to build that sense of alliance, because the big thing is the social, the economic, the cultural, the environmental, they all come together. They come together in every person's lives, in every community, in Ireland as a whole, in Europe, and in things. And I'm going to leave it there now. It is a framework. Make hard targets. Hold the government to hard targets. Hold Europe to hard targets, because the SDGs get put in a lot of documents. And in your own local plans, make sure it's not simply the officials, even though they may be wonderful, putting the SDGs in there, but that you give your ideas about what the SDGs mean for your local place. Thank you.
Thanks, Alice, Mary. It's always hard in these webinars. You can't hear the applause, but that was perfect, really highlighting how the goals act as a common framework or a common language for us to collaborate and work better together. That was perfect. We're going to have 2 case studies now. And just to remind you, please, any insights or questions or anything needs clarified, please just stick it in the chat. And also, if you've not introduced yourself, it's quite a good place just to show the diversity of the participation. So we're dropping into 2 case studies, a global and a local. So the first case study is from a Greek local authority. Councillor Pavlos Giardias is going to give us an insight into his work at the Council of Alexandroupolis. Pavlos is an ethnobiologist, but works as a consultant to NGOs across and research institutions across Europe, but focus on science policy and innovation projects for sustainability and climate action. So we have 8 minutes with Pavlos. Pavlos, thank you for being here.
Thanks, Davey, and thanks for the onboarding presentations. I'm going to be sharing a screen, some slides, so you can understand a little bit the context we are working with in Greece. And I hope everyone is able to watch those slides. So I come from Alexandroupoli. You can see that on the northeastern coast of Greece, very close to the border of Greece and Europe with Turkey. It is a corner of Europe that, as you know, in the last 10 years has been challenged a lot by a very perversive debt crisis, which has hit mainly my generation. I am 39 years old and I am leader of opposition in the local community council. And I have run for elections 1 year ago, 1.5 years ago, 1 year ago, under the sustainability and the sustainable development goals agenda. So our region has always been a crossroads of cultures, very rich natural environment, traditional rural practices that we think can provide assets for local development and ecotourism and agritourism and eco-hospitality. And a big opportunity is that we are one of the very few cities in the Balkans and the Eastern Mediterranean where we have infrastructure, transport infrastructure, like we host at the same time a port, a highway, a railway, and an airport. However, it is a challenge to live in the borders of Europe, and especially in the last years with all these big migrant flows and all the nationalist rhetoric that has emerged across Europe, we have been on the front line. But also in the last 3 years, we have experienced some really opaque decision-making processes around the future of our infrastructure in the region. There is an LNG platform that they want to build offshore. There is the TAP gas pipeline that has been constructed. And as we are speaking, 3,000 US troops are moving from our port towards Romania. And no one has really been able to understand what type of relationships are being played in the geostrategic field. Now, at the type of quality of life, at the level of everyday quality of life in Greece and in our city, we have some, let's say, endemic problems that have to do with governance, transparency, corruption. And I'm giving you an example of a park that costed 5 million euro and has been delivered to the city 3 years ago. So this is what you're looking here is a picture of a screenshot of the study. It is a maquette. It is a graphic illustration of how the park should look like. You want to see how it looks like in reality? Oh God. So from here to reality. So this is lack of sustainability, not in the context of some, I don't know, active young people that want to take action on the climate, but in the context that very hot public money is being thrown in infrastructure that have no life at all, not a short lifespan, but no life at all. And to me, this is a blatant example of unsustainability. My response to that, here on the right side, you can see the main landmark of our city is a lighthouse. So I have gathered up a team of young professionals and scientists from our city, and we fought Pharos, the lighthouse of Alexandroupoli. That's the name of our political group. And we have sort of translated the 17 SDGs into 10 community policy pillars for our local community. So we have combined SDG number 13 and 15 in order to speak about sustainable urban green. We have taken SDG 14 in order to talk about sustainable urban blue, our sea and our rivers. We have taken SDG number 11 to talk about sustainable urban mobility, and SDG number 2 to talk about sustainable urban food systems. And in this way, we have been sort of grouping and clustering the indicators and the aspirations of different SDGs around simple to grasp narratives for the everyday ordinary people, like the circular and social economy, innovation and entrepreneurship for sustainability, civil society and democracy, culture and creative industry, social solidarity, sustainably urban design. Now, these keywords are not really easy to grasp, but the way we dress them with living examples like the park I showed you, this is what inspired people. And these are the 15 people, the 15 persons that have joined me in the ballot paper, you know, in the list. These are teachers, musicians, architects, winemakers, doctors, scientists, people with analytical skills that we tried to bring together in order to solve this multiple crisis in our time. And we started translating the message also visually. We led a 2-month campaign that cost only €3,000, including paying for the ballot paper. But we felt that we had a political strategy already in place. We have a global vision, and our only job is to translate it into the local context. So we have started promoting planting of new trees, promoting care-based policies, which proved to be very relevant to the COVID crisis. We have started talking about the protection of our coastline by trying to remind the relationship that our community has always had with this sea, so we must protect it. So the lighthouse of Alexandroupoli, in 2 months, we managed to mobilize the 26%, just over the 26% of the votes. And this is a mandate, a message, a political message for youth-led, science-based, evidence-based political action for the SDGs at the local level. Now, it's funny because 1 month after we achieved this result, the national government changed and they changed the law. So they totally revoked the implementation power from our council. So now they have concentrated superpowers to the mayor and committees, non-paid consultants, not unelected consultants, very well paid unelected consultants. So we are in sort of a deadlock that from one side we are inspiring community and we are inspiring leverage for raising leverage for the SDGs. On the other side, this emerges as something threatening to the mainstream establishment. So although we have the ability to suggest, so our role from facilitative role became simply a consultancy or a consultative role. So we provide opinions. So since we cannot work with the actual implementation, policy implementation bodies of the city council, we can still work with the community. So we have inspired a movement of solidarity, togetherness, and collaboration and participation using specific methodologies and toolkits that inspire people to get together, raising inspirations from some values that are really core to the development of the SDGs, civic participation for one thing. And through this multi-consultative process, we are able to process a number of strategies for the city. And through our participation in the council, we are still make these recommendations. They get into the protocol of the city, and most of the time end up in a drawer, but so they are not put forward because of the dynamics I'm expressing you. But we are hoping that since now we are still into the first year of our term, in the next 3 years, there will be space as those ideas and the value of the SDGs becomes more relevant and more visible. And that's why I think it's very important that networks of cities from all over Europe and all over the world sort of gather up and converge like we do together I was in the similar meeting on Monday, and I drew amazing inspirations from a country that has a climate law, but Greece doesn't have a climate law. By only by comparing where we are and our struggle to put our cause forward in different ways and by following different pathways, I believe it's really empowering and unlocking a lot of potential. To give you an example of
I've lost, we have to wind up.
Yes. To give you an example of a solid community-led proposal that we have done to the city is that we have took all the data of the empty green spaces in the city, and we found out that only 5% of the total cover is given to empty green spaces, public spaces. That's like 4.5 square meters per citizen, when the minimum from the WHO is 9 square meters. So we created this process.
No comment.
Excuse me?
Sorry, it's just someone unmuted themselves.
Okay.
If you could just start closing.
I'm wrapping up, David. So from this scenario, we started designing a new web of green areas in the city, which drastically increases this, the green spaces and how they are connected together. When you connect green spaces, you're promoting walking and sustainable mobility. And these are the new type, this type of systemic propositions that we are bringing to the city. That is my presentation. I hope you are, it invokes some inspirations for the continuation of the dialogue and the breakout session. And I'm happy to answer any questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Pavlos. So any questions into the chat? We'll have some space after this next case study. Thanks so much, Pavlos, given that sort of overview from Greece, helping us see what other local authorities, councillors and local institutions are doing. We'll zoom back into Ireland now, and we're going to have a case study from an Irish local authority. We have with us Jeanette O'Brien, who's the Environmental Witness Officer for Carlow County Council. And last year, Carlow County Council was selected as one of the 12 champions in Ireland for the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So we'll pass over to Jeanette. Jeanette, you have 8 minutes.
Okay, folks, sorry, just trying to upload the screen. So my name is Jeanette O'Brien, and as Davy said, I'm the Environmental Awareness and Education Officer here in Carlow County Council. Most of you have somebody like me or better than me in all of your local authorities throughout Ireland. So just to say, I'm going to take a whistle-stop tour because, as Davy knows, I love to talk about SDGs, so he's going to be ringing his bell for me. Okay, so basically in 2019, the government called for expression of interest. There were 76 applications received, and shortlisting happened, and the Minister appointed Carlow County Council as the first council to be SDG champions at the National Ploughing in 2019. And through a process, we were given 6 of the goals that we were to concentrate on for the duration of the championship. So these are the other partners as well, the other champions. So you can see from some of the logos, they're fairly high hitters. So we had a big challenge ahead of us because our team consisted of 3 people, now down to 2. So really our role as SDG champions was to act as leader, raising awareness. People in Ireland weren't aware of the goals, even weren't aware of what the emblem stood for, so I suppose local authorities were important in bringing through the message because of the capacity we have for networking and the reach that we have into every facet of our local, regional and national communities and structures. So we also had to undertake to translate the SDGs into practical actions at local level, because often when people talk about the goals, they're talking at a very high level, and then to be able to bring it to your local tidy towns groups or your local I work with a group of early school leavers. So to permeate from the CCMA right down through to ordinary people in our community and see how the goals suit them and fit them, and also to work in partnership with national and local organisations. So we sat down, we had a look, and we had a look at all of the different kind of networking opportunities that we would have, and we put a list of action together. We kind of did a monitoring activity log as well, so that we weren't duplicating, and we had an idea of where and who we had spoken to. First of all, we started with a little bit of the branding. We popped it onto our website. At the end of my email, the branding is always there. And we were given a nice logo as champions. So we've made sure to brand all of our publications and all of our media publications as well, with the fact that we're champions to promote that, the fact that we're very proud. We communicated through our local radio stations, our local newspapers. We have it on our Facebook or social media, even internally through our own Outlook. We changed our branding a lot as well, just first of all to get the message out there that the goals existed. So it wasn't just, it's often seen as an environmental tool. It's not just an environmental tool. We all need to understand that the goals involving people, prosperity and planet permeate all of the different functional areas in our local authority. So it should be in housing, it should be in planning, even motor tax. Every single functional area in the local authority should be involved in the implication of the goals. This is kind of just a quick shot of, you know, we were doing, most of you are probably aware of the fact that your local authorities brought in the segregation of waste bylaws. So when we did a bit of work on that, up in the top left-hand corner, we made sure to include the logo. And that's our county manager in the middle. Our left is our Cathaoirleach, and on the right is the President of Chamber of Commerce. We only launched something in the Southeast last week based on a roadside litter campaign, but we made sure to have the goals there so people to start the conversation. So as I said, we had to connect and collaborate local, regional, national. This is a snapshot, very quick snapshot of some of the national and regional as well as the local connections and conversations and presentations and working opportunities that we've had. We reckon we've worked and spoken to over 70 different groups and organisations, and we probably have spoken to in the region of 2,500 people. So on the right hand side you'll see the images. You have Carlow IT. We did a project with our local GA incorporating work as well with the energy agency. So we're looking for networking opportunities, not just to communicate the message but also to take part in projects with them. We started to put the word out on our national publications as well. This is the Garda Times. Every Garda in Ireland receives it, and on the bottom left we had started the branding. This is something that we had sent out to the local authority news, which all of you are familiar with. It goes to every local authority official and member in Ireland, as well as several different important departments and organisations. Also, we had an article in the Rural Water News lately as well, explaining the goals and explaining specifically for them, you know, the relevance of Goal 6 and what they needed to do. So that goes to every group water scheme in Ireland, which is probably over 1,000. So again, we're, like Alice Mary said, it's all of us officials can draw up beautiful documents and policies and give lip service to the goals, but it's not even happening at the moment. They're not even going out to the organisations. They're not even putting them into their strategy. So we have, as you all have, your county development issues paper is out there at the moment. We're at stage 2 in the development plan process. And last April, we have actually put our goals into our first paper on the county development process. But it was interesting to see, we were delighted then to see that in the new programme for government, the local authorities have now been charged to ensure that the relevance of the SDGs are put into their plans, into future plans. Also at the moment, we're doing a litter management plan. We're at phase 1 at the moment. So again, I'll be doing this personally. I will make sure that it's not just lip service, but the relevance of the goals to the actions in the plan are actually communicated to everybody, whether it's elected members or people that are living in our community. Looking at different functional areas getting involved. I'm much faster this time, Davy, aren't I? Looking at different organisations getting involved. I know that there's somebody there from the Leo. This is something that our local enterprise office did here in Carlow, and so they actually developed a pilot scheme between IT Carlow, Carlow County Council and Tipperary County Council, and it was funded under the Catalyst programme. And they actually used the different sustainable development goals to kind of do a health check on local businesses in Tipperary and actually businesses in Wales as well, because that's what the Catalyst programme is about. So they have developed a health check to see how companies are performing with the goals, and also how the goals can become a fundamental part of their policies and their structure going forward, and giving them practical advice and information on how to achieve some of the goals within their daily businesses. For me in Ireland, it's particularly important for our local SMEs, because the goals are an international language now. It's very important for us in terms of sustainability and the green image and the green message that goes across to all of the countries that we deal with. So for any of the slides that I have that are involving any of the other functional areas or other organisations, you'll find at the bottom, if you need further information, I have actually put their contact details down. So if anyone's interested in that one, you can contact our local enterprise office. We're also working with other companies like Carlow Tourism Company here in Carlow, and they're just finished doing their strategy and action plan 2020-2025. 2025. So we've worked with Eileen and her team. You know, they're building a strategy for tourism around the county, for including all key stakeholders. So they're now practically linking the objectives of the strategy to the different SDGs, so that we're hitting a whole new audience with them again and a whole new relevance. So we're kind of looking at seeing how we can develop a sustainable tourist product while also encompassing the objectives of the goals in terms of people, prosperity and planet. And I think that's going to be really important for the tourism products in Ireland going forward in terms of promoting a sustainable product in rural Ireland, building resilient and sustainable communities, and also job creation. So the other things we have done is we have made changes at our local level, and these are all things that you have in your own local authorities as well, all different things that you're carrying out through your environmental awareness officers or your community departments. So the two guys on the left there are Joe and Anthony from the department, and they're the leaders in pushing out the sustainable development goals throughout the department and through all the partners. And so we have, they're very involved in the policy making, they're very involved in the UN policy making. So we're working with them to translate it down to local level, and some of the things that we have implemented in Carlow have actually now been taken on board by the guys in the department, and you will see changes happening throughout your application forms and throughout national structures like your tidy towns. We were working with them to build in Sustainable Development Goals in the application process for the tidy towns. So to help tidy towns understand, and also to help them research the goals and understand how their actions can support attaining the objectives of the goals. We're also working on publishing a booklet for our tidy towns nationally to understand the goals. The same, we changed the criteria with the Green Schools Assessment, especially in relation to the Global Citizen project. We changed the LA21 to include the objectives of the goals, or to get the communities to research what they're doing in terms of their projects that link to the goals. And we have a very exciting project coming on board now with the Rotary Ireland and the School Bikes for Africa. So I just want to say a huge thank you to Carlow PPN. You know, all of you have your PPNs in your area. I know the effectiveness is different, and the challenges are different, and the successes are different. But I cannot say enough about our PPN here in Carlow, led by Grania, who's our coordinator there. I mean, they have been super in supporting us in communicating and reaching out and networking in getting the goals going. So they've held lots of conferences, workshops, newsletters, media. I'll finish up by just saying it's fantastic to get an opportunity to talk to elected members, because you have such an important job in terms of policy and communicating policy and ensuring that policy happens within local authorities and your area. And it's like Alice Mary said, officials like me can turn around and we can make any policy, or we can draw up any plans or proposals. I would encourage all of you to go back to your local authorities and to ask, where are we working with the goals? Why aren't we fitting in the goals in there? And don't just accept the policies that we put before you. Also to turn around and say, I don't see anything about the Sustainable Development Goals and the practical implication. Thanks very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Jeanette. Thank you for those case studies. We're going to open up for a couple of questions, but we're going to hear the results of the poll, Michael Ewing. So if you could give us the results.
Yeah, the jury's in. The 21 of you filled in the poll, and 62% said that the SDGs are not widely known about in your local authority. 19% said they're paid lip service or just tick box exercise. Lip service is the change that I'm looking at. 19% said a tick box or labelling exercise for plans and programs. 19% said they're regularly referred to as a resource when developing plans. 0% said they're integrated core part of the development and implementation of plans and programs. So in other words, there's a lot of people don't know about them in the local authorities. They're given they're a tick box exercise for some programs, and for about less than 20%, they're referred to directly in the planning and programming. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Michael. We are a little over time, but let's take a few questions before we go into the breakouts. So, Councillor Cat O'Driscoll from Dublin County Council, would you like to ask? And Sean McDermott, I can see you want to come in as well. So maybe start with Cat O'Driscoll. If you can be as concise as possible, and also as concise as possible the answers. Cat?
Thank you. So in Dublin City Council, we're about to begin the review of our city plan. So I'm very eager for very practical tips on how we might implement SDGs. So I'm wondering, was there a set of questions or a key question that you began with, was thinking about Pablo's, but perhaps Janet, that when you were building your locally focused translation of the strategic goals, was there a particular question or set of questions you used to begin that work?
Okay, I
Jeanette,
suppose,
should be first.
yeah, I suppose what we had to do there was to really understand the goals ourselves. So to arm ourselves with information and understand the connectivity and the interdependency of the goals and the way they can be clustered and going forward. And then we had to make sure that we communicated it to, say, from our chief executive down to our elected members. So that's kind of where we started on looking at our county development plan there. And then we're going to take a thematic approach through the plan, explaining how the goals are relevant in each situation.
Great. Pavlos, do you want to add anything very briefly to that?
Yes, I just want to add that, like all the proposals that we did, official proposals to the city, the majority leader considers them as something that is out there and something very big and all this. Hopefully and thankfully, this is not happening in the society itself. So, you know, I think it's a great time for inspiring community action. I'm sure that in your cities, there are a lot of networks, local NGOs, communities that are already working on this type of narratives. And a good start would be to invite them to start gathering up all these ideas. And all you need to do as a city is provide the space and don't overwhelm them with the bureaucracies. Be a creative bureaucrat. Okay,
very good, Pavlos. Sean McDermott, a quick question for you.
Yeah, thanks very much, and well done to the people that put on the presentations. They are very interesting. I'm councillor in Leitrim, in a rural part of Leitrim. I was very interested what Michael spoke there earlier on. He was on about population and the growing population. But some parts of our country hasn't a growing population, and I suppose coming from a rural area, a weak rural area, and I see at the moment where we have gridlock in our cities, morning, noon and night. The rural areas, some of the parishes and communities are dying because of lack of people. So we have no balance. So I think maybe now is a good time to look at this issue, because a lot of people are working from home now because of COVID, and employers are finding it very useful and working very well. So I think we have to address this problem of the imbalance of population.
Okay, thanks, Sean, for that. I'm not going to open that up. I think Sean, you're making a very good point. There's maybe a need for a rural renaissance and a repopulating of our towns and villages for sustainability across Ireland. We have to think of the global, and it's obviously there that the population problem is going to be an issue. Alice, maybe very briefly.
Yeah, so just first, as much as I wouldn't necessarily agree that the population thing is the problem, I think it's more about how we live rather than who's there. I think it's about how we're living. But the goals are really important because they address not just inequality between countries, but inequality within countries. So it is exactly a really useful tool for saying that Leitrim, that every part of the country, it's not enough if Ireland is hitting the goals, you know, looked at in a national level. It needs to be achieving the goals at all of these local levels. And that's really important. The last thing, just on CAT, I would say these strategic plans that are going in now are going to cover so many of the years. You know, this is something with a timeline. It's not something that we have forever. We have until 2030. So there's exactly 10 years, and every month of it matters. And that's why I think it's really important for councillors to be ambitious to say, actually, this is our plan for the next 5 years. Will it have got us, not just will it have kind of shown awareness of the goals, will have got us fully or all of the way there on them. And there's lots of really concrete things that you can do. Lastly, I would say is make sure you get actual indicators, not just aspirational language, but indicate, and there's suggested indicators in there, but you can add your own. Like what?
And there's more work being done on that.
Thanks.
Okay, then Pamela Kearns, if you could just type your question in, because we're really running out of time here. Type your question in, or we can bring it back in to the next section, but we have to go into the breakouts. The breakouts is an opportunity for us to have a smaller discussion. They'll last about 20-25 minutes. They will be lightly moderated, and when we get into the breakout rooms, we'll just quickly introduce who we are and where we're from. And the question, I'm just going to share my screen again to share the question, and maybe Katrina, if you could put it into the chat. The question, very simply, am I shared? Can you see my screen? What specific actions can we as local authorities take to ensure the Sustainable Development Goals form the foundation of our recovery plan? So from this moment on, so that's our question. If it's in the chat as well, we've there. Michael will put us into the breakout rooms and we'll be invited to come back in. If you could really put your screen on now when you go into the breakouts, it can be really helpful. And we are audio recording it just for the harvest, just for capturing some of the insights. And we're going to hear one insight from each group when we come back from the breakouts. So Michael, take us to the breakouts, please. So again, folks, as we're now back in plenary, we're going to hear from each room, just one insight, just to get a flavour. But remember, we can capture any insight or questions that can be resolved after this meeting and brought into the report that will be shared with you in the chat. So please look at that. So we were exploring in our breakout rooms what specific actions local authorities can take to ensure the goals become the foundation for a recovery plan. And so we had, how many groups, Michael? Five groups. So I was in a group and we have a little feedback from my group from Kat.
Thank you. We had a very valuable discussion. We talked a lot about the need for both top-down and bottom-up approaches in education and awareness about the SDGs, but also as using them for frameworks for the different plans that are at different stages everywhere, that they are very useful as a silo buster for different areas, and that it brings a common language to what we're working on.
Thank you, Kat. It was really well modelled as well about the sort of length. So Catherine, your group.
That's me, I believe. Hello, Davy.
Dan.
We talked about the possibility, given that local authorities are at a similar stage with development plans, that the engagement, the wider public engagement, both in promoting the idea of SDGs and using them as a template, which the development plans can be a checklist, and thus attempt to improve the development plan in terms of its scope and its quality by referring regularly and constantly to the SDGs themselves.
Great, thanks Dan for that. And Pavlos's group.
Yeah, thanks. Very interesting discussion, and thanks to the participants. We have identified the areas that have to do with mobility and access to spaces where people don't gather up closely packed to each other, and also some mitigation measures, as we are talking about foundations, which have to do with a radical greening of our cities, rewilding, investment in nature-based solutions and blue and green infrastructure, but also make use of the power that we have with emergent technologies, citizen science, community sensing, to provide evidence for the change, but also to engage massively. In general, raise awareness and tie the SDGs with the specific EU policies that are coming up, and they're all about the SDGs, and all the money will be there.
Yeah, I think that might have been a recurring theme. Thanks, Pavlos. Alice Mary, your group? You're on mute.
Hello, that's me. I think one of the big takeaways we had was really just about communication, the importance of having something tangible that people can relate to, rather than it just being a kind of a nebulous concept. And one of the ways in which we could drive things forward in a practical sense, which came in right at the end there, was for example, if every SPC had at its core and was dealing with SDGs. And also looking at the importance of not coming just from the chief executive, but being a process whereby there's communication between the executive and councillors, feeding back then to the public as well.
Okay, thanks, Alan. And Katrina, your group.
Dan actually fed back. I think it's Catherine. Yeah, who should be next?
Catherine.
Thanks. Yeah, so I'm actually feeding back for our group. Thanks to everyone who was in the chat. It was a great chat. So one of the main points coming back from ours was to really use the targets. One of the barriers that was felt was that the kind of the high level aspirational look at the targets can be hard to grasp, or at the SDGs. But when you break it down and look at the actual targets, it makes it much more, much easier to grasp and much more applicable for local work. And then another that came from it as well, with an idea was to have presentations from groups, from local groups to councillors on the SDGs, just to really see where the SDGs can feed into the impact on planning, and to bring that information to the councillors. So that kind of awareness raising in that way would be brilliant.
Okay, thanks, Catherine. It sounds like we had really rich conversations in all the rooms. Does anyone like to share any insights that haven't been mentioned? Now, I can't see everyone, so if you could put an H in the chat or put your hand up and I'll scroll between the screens. Anyone like to share anything that they've observed, or bring in anything else that's not been highlighted here that was in the discussion?
Just a single sentence. It was interesting that there is that question of there being a tension that the SDGs don't just get seen as something that money gets spent on, but that that they are in fact the way that the local communities, society and economy progress, and that there's actually really opportunities, as I think somebody else mentioned. There's potentially opportunities for businesses and for local economic actors associated with the SDGs as well. And of course, the strategic development plans, that they are so crucial.
Yeah,
right.
And we're starting to see, I mean, we use is it Aldi or Lidl's strategy going forward that they've framed in the goals. So again, helping the public see how they stay coherent. Pavlos.
Yes, also a reflection from our discussion is like you have an opportunity to work with your Irish climate law. In Greece, we don't have a climate law. The SDGs are not legally bound, but when you have a national law, it means that you give a certain direction of travel to the society, to investors, to entrepreneurs, to all these that you know very well are driving political success in the city, jobs, Brilliant. And so on. So make use of your climate law. It is attached with wider EU and global policy agendas, and this is the direction of travel. Great,
thank you. Michael?
Yeah, just quickly, one of the obvious interfaces between community and local government is the LCDC, the Local Community Development Committee, and the development of the Local Economic Community Plan. There's clearly a space there for the SDGs to be driven deep inside that system, and it isn't happening at the moment, at least not in Roscommon.
Yeah, and one of the things that was stressed in our group was the opportunity of this moment. The SDGs, that common language, that framework, that cross-cutting agenda can help us think about how we move out of this, where we're at in the pandemic, but move into the just transition that we need. Okay, if no one...
Could I just say something?
Sorry, I can't see you, but just come in. David, there you are.
How you doing? Yeah. Just oftentimes when we're talking about SDGs or climate mitigation issues, and it's presented in a way of kind of highlighting what people aren't doing, what people should be doing, and what people can be doing. But maybe what might be useful as a kind of a base, a starting point, would be to use the SDGs to apply them to the current practices, to encourage people to use them because this is what they're already doing.
Yeah.
But this is the language around what you're already doing. And just to show people that doesn't require an entire change of lifestyle, doesn't require an entire change of how work practice, of policy. It just says, oh, look, these are your policies. And funnily enough, these policies that you already have, you're already working to the SDGs. These are the ones and people can then say, instead of starting from zero, they're saying, oh, we're doing this, we just didn't know we were doing it.
That's a fantastic point.
You know, and it might just so you can do. A lot of people are doing a lot of good. They just don't recognize. They don't realize they're doing it already.
That's a great point. And the SDGs and these goals shouldn't be more work for us. It should be a way to present our work in a more coherent way.
Yes.
And we saw from Jeanette many of the things that they're already doing. They now just show which goals they address to bring some coherence. We have a question or an insight from Andrea.
Yeah, sorry, just to say we're blessed in Carlow County Council, I suppose, to have someone as passionate and committed as Jeanette, working and being the sustainable development champions that we have, I suppose, that experience. And I'm sure Jeanette would be willing to speak to other councils and councillors to give the benefit of our experiences to them, you know, especially because we're maybe one step ahead, maybe, or that, you know, we have the practical experience of what we have been doing over the past while. So I'm sure if people got in contact with Jeanette, that she would be more than happy to facilitate meetings to see how things can be done from a practical level, or what worked well for us or what didn't work so well. But I think everything has worked very well, but thanks.
Great. Thanks, Andrea. And that's a nice segue into our next and final piece, which is really our keynote reflection. So our tradition has been to invite people to reflect as well as to present. So we have Sarah Franklin today. Sarah was a former coordinator of Coalition 2030, which is the Irish Civil Society Coalition. Can't remember how many groups are involved, but advocating for the SDGs. And it's a great cross-cutting coalition with development and trade unions and environmentalists working together. Currently, Sarah serves as the policy officer for SDG Watch Europe, which is a member of the steering group, and our main focus there is building a strategy for policy coherence for sustainable development in collaboration with members organizations across the 27 EU member states. So Sarah's going to just give us, for a few minutes, a reflection. You saw her going between the different rooms, and she's listened to the presentations. So Sarah, your reflections.
Taking the time out to be with us and explore what specific actions we can take around the SDGs. And I wish I could have spent the full time in every single room, because it was really, really interesting. It was a very, very rich discussion in every single room. I just want to highlight a couple of points here. You know, in the very beginning, Michael, you gave us the context, and really, which was the difficulty around the SDGs, or the lack of awareness, etc., and the challenges that we face at the global level. And you also pointed out that COVID-19 is an unprecedented opportunity for us to really think differently. And we talked about the global framework of the SDGs and how important that can be as a real tool for us now as councillors, and in all of our different walks of life, and what we're doing, how we can actually use the SDGs to leave no one behind. And we went then into Mary Alice Higgins, who really highlighted the message of partnership for the goals, and how can we get SDGs to fit into this model. And she made a really good point that SDGs is one of the sort of golden moments of great vision that offers us this opportunity to create a sustainable Ireland. And I wanted to just point out too that in terms of working with the different councillors and at all the different levels within council and within the developing of strategies and plans, we all have this opportunity, a new opportunity to work together. You know, looking at the different types of partnerships in order to exchange ideas and to learn, but also to be innovators in terms of, you know, we are all innovators. You wouldn't be in this room if you weren't in some way dedicated to sustainability in Ireland. And, you know, we're all supporting each other in this. There are many, many different ways that councillors can take a leadership role regarding the SDGs. It's so important to be able to communicate policy and to really work together. And we are all in this together. And we really do need to work together. And, you know, here we all are sitting in our living rooms. This is a way for us. We've got Pavlos there, and we've heard some fascinating and very inspiring ways that Pavlos has worked with his communities and to bring the SDGs to life in a completely different way, you know, and he's really taken the time to look at the targets and done the homework to translate. And I would say that myself and all of my colleagues are willing to work with councillors to help develop that. kind of strategy. We've heard from Jeanette, really inspiring on being an SDGs champion. And I would like to put out a challenge to all of the councillors here. I would like to see each and every councillor in Ireland become an SDGs champion. And you'll all get one of these badges if you do, but also I think it would be incredibly inspiring if we could all work together. Pavlos made a great comment, and he said, it's a great time for local action. Be a creative bureaucrat. So we're cutting the scissors on the silos now. This is part of what this meeting is doing. And we're inviting you to take this opportunity to step outside your preconceived, or shall we say entrenched, maybe understandings or experiences of working in council, and say, look, let's all step outside this together and let's really work together to think differently, to innovate, to be creative. I mean, so many people today in our breakout rooms and with the facilitators have given us really good insights into what we can do. And this isn't the end, this is the very beginning. It's the tip of the iceberg. And what we want to do is to work with you closely in whatever way. If you've got issues and challenges, we want to hear about them. We want you to come back to us privately, publicly. Maybe we should have a WhatsApp group going, I don't know. But some way we want to work with you and to help with in this delivery. We've got the national implementation plan happening very soon with the government. This is an incredible opportunity for the councils to get engaged, and we can give you more information about that. And I'm actually going to wind up there, but just to say a very big thank you to all of you. It's been a privilege to hear your inputs and to see the amazing work that you're all doing and grappling with, and we're here to support you in the delivery of the SDGs. So we're an open book as far as that. So thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Davy. Thanks, everybody. I was only able to participate in one of the discussion groups, but I think from what I've heard, many of the discussions were similar in the groups. So just by way of reflection, what I've heard is, you know, Michael set out I suppose, the grand challenge, just to center us and remind ourselves, you know, the exponential growth in the human population, the economy being there to serve society and being part of the environment, all of it taken together. And our economy has kind of got it the other way round, really. Species on the verge of mass extinctions, the carbon challenge, all that stuff. So let's just take all that as read, but it's important to understand the global challenge. Alice Mary then, importantly, I think, contexted something important. She drew an analogy with the United Nations Charter for Human Rights and noted that that didn't automatically result in rights for all, but just simply set a standard, if you will, that a standard and expectations that people could aspire to regarding what they should expect for rights. But she went on to use a revealing word. She talked about the continuing struggle for full human rights for all, as per the Charter. And I think that word struggle is key and has an important role to play in relation to understanding councillors' roles with regard to the SDGs, because the word struggle implies that it's political. It's not just going to happen by itself, and it needs to be driven, okay? So I think this is just an important little concept I'd ask you to hang on to for a second. So, you know, in terms of, in other words, struggle implies resistance, okay? And resistance can be either passive or active. And I think Pavlos then kind of brought another interesting concept in relation to what Pavlos said, that there's, you know, there are vested interests that are putting economic growth above other priorities as identified in the SDGs. So there's this piece about inertia, was another word that Pavlos used, which we need to get around. He said we need to overcome the inertia, and the SDGs provide a framework to overcome this to achieve sustainability in communities. So I think councillors have a role to play there. It's essentially a leadership role with regarding the SDGs. The SDGs provide both an inspiration and a framework to win arguments about what's possible locally. So I'm introducing, this is what I've heard. councillors need to be thinking about what's possible locally, okay? They need to be challenging what's possible, and there's an inertia, okay, and also perhaps active resistance to some of the changes that are needed to achieve sustainability. So we need to be thinking about these things in our role, in our leadership roles as councillors. Then there's a challenge, okay? We need to accept this, and we heard really good stuff from Jeanette in relation to what they're doing. There's a challenge in moving from the abstract general concepts to practical local manifestations of what's possible, okay? And again, I'm using some of the language that Pavlos very helpfully used there. So Jeanette gave us really good, I think, an oversight as to first steps that councils and councillors can take. There's clearly a raising awareness priority here. We've heard about low levels of understanding on the part of the general public and amongst councillors themselves and amongst executives in councils about what the SDG means, what the SDGs mean. Now, here's where I'm going to challenge everybody in the context of what I've just said, okay? This is my job as rapporteur to come in and give my perspective. So I think it's really important that we start, and council start with awareness raising work, but we need to move beyond that to challenging current ambitions, okay? And this is an education job for everybody. We heard from Jeanette about the raising awareness work and then translating that, the abstract concepts, to practical actions and new initiatives. Now, this is my tuppence worth. I think we need to move beyond simply aligning existing activity with the SDGs and describing existing activity using the SDGs. That's passive and it's not leadership, okay? We need to move beyond aligning the existing activity with the SDGs to reviewing current local authority policy against what the SDGs suggest is possible, to identify stretch targets to be achieved locally in relation to each of them, okay? Can you see the distinction I'm making there between simply describing what we're doing currently using the language of SDGs, which is a necessary first step and a good thing, but it can't stop there. It needs to quickly move beyond that to understanding what's possible. And this is where councillors need to really look at we all need to look at ourselves, because we're all citizens. Councillors just happen to be elected citizens, okay, and have important roles to play. So I would challenge that we need to get the awareness raising bit going and the education bit going. That's a first step, but it can't just stop at the idea of establishing the SDGs as branding, okay? That's important, but it needs to move beyond that. Councillors have the power to determine changes needed in their localities for sustainability, okay? That's the job of councillors. Now, it's a complex environment, I accept. We all know that there'll be a need to create linkages to all of the local entities locally. There's the education bodies and the ETBs and the Department of Education. There's the Departments of Children and Families and the SIPCs. There's the Department of Enterprise and the LEOs. We've heard about the PPNs. Don't let that paralyze. Somehow, the important thing is to understand locally that the SDGs are telling us something. They're throwing down a challenge to us. We need to do more to make progress under the 17 grounds and goals in relation to it. And we need to look at what we're doing in local communities and think about how can we be more ambitious, okay? So in a way, it's about using the SDGs to drive existing processes to perhaps change the level of ambition in those processes and strategies, okay? So in conclusion, I would say that we need to move beyond using the SDGs to describe what is being done, to actually drive what is being done, okay? That would seem to me to be my biggest takeaway in relation to what I've heard. We need to answer the question, what does embedding goals into strategies, that was language that was used by Jeanette, what does that actually mean, okay? It should mean causing those strategies to be re-evaluated in the context of the goals, okay? And to be revised in the context of the goals with new objectives set in relation to the relevant goals, okay? So, Michael, I think I'll probably stop there, Davy. I have more to say, but to say more would be to abuse my role as rapporteur. I want to conclude by saying I think there's great energy and interest here. It's really good to see the number of people who've taken part today. My own sense is that another session as long as this would be needed, okay? Just to dig a little bit more into what would be meant by evaluating existing strategies and plans in relation to re-understanding what's needed to use the SDGs to drive strategies rather than to describe what's already happening. That seems to me to be the key to it. And that's a challenge I would throw down for everybody here and for the organisers of today's event. Okay?
Okay. Thank you, Ivan, for your keynote reflection. That was fantastic. Just to wrap up now, there'll be a report that comes from this with your questions and reflections taken from the chat, with the transcripts from our small group conversations, and some other resources that could be very helpful in your work in local authorities and as councillors. So it just leaves me to thank all our speakers, Michael, Alice Mary, Pavlos, Jeanette, and Ivan, and especially for you for giving that time to this on such a sunny, beautiful day. So thank you all. Thanks for all the organisers at the IEN, and let's keep this movement going. So thank you, and we'll see you next time.